your teachers have a copy of this book, and this is a really valuable resource. But the Balance with Blended Learning is also an extremely valuable resource. Blended Learning in Action has lots of good stuff, but so does the yellow book. So I know them as the yellow book and the blue book. So, all right, so let me go ahead and go on to slide 2. Can you guys see my screen, by the way? Are you able to see this pretty easily? Okay, perfect. Metacognition is the ability to think about what we are learning, how we're learning, and what we want to learn in the future, which are skills that need to be explicitly taught and honed in the classroom. That's an interesting piece. Kids need to be explicitly taught how to think metacognitively. That seems like a really big word for that. But what does that sound like to you? The ability to think about what we're learning, how we're learning it, what we want to learn in the future. Isn't that what we are asking kids to do? Aren't we asking kids, if I walk into a classroom, those are the questions that I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask a student, so what are you working on? Why are you working on this? How do you know when you've mastered this? What do you do when you're finished with it or when you've mastered it? What do you do next? Those are the kind of questions that we use when we visit students. And they're the type of questions that your teachers should be asking their students and explicitly teaching kids how to think in that way. So students that develop metacognitive skills are more actively engaged in the learning process because now they're more aware of what they're doing and why they're doing it. I know when I was first learning to be a teacher, one of the steps in the learning process or in the lesson cycle was you had to tell or talk about why whatever the skill is or the concept is or was, why they need to know this. And many times we would just kind of, give them one sentence, you need to know this because blah, 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 and then move on, right? Well, kids never really know why they need to know something. They think they need to know it because teacher tells me I need to know it. Okay, I'm doing the paper, I do what you tell me to do, but I never really think about what am I learning from this and why am I doing this and how is this going to benefit me in the future? And that's what we want students to do. We want them to ask those types of questions of themselves and to think about why they're doing what they're doing and what they're learning from it. So students recognize their progress proactively, students that recognize their progress proactively think of ways to improve and work through moments of failure. You want kids to have that type of thought. You want kids to think, okay, what do I need to do to improve? Not just to move the bar up, just to have, a higher score on the graph, but what is it that I need to do in order to grow, in order to improve, in order to be better? Once kids start thinking in that way, they're much more engaged in the learning process itself, because now they're thinking about, well, what's good for me? What is going to help me learn this content, this concept, this skill, whatever it is that they're doing. And that's what we want from kids. If you remember the last time, we talked about kids doing most of the work in the classroom, not the teacher. We want kids to be doing that. We don't want teachers to be doing all the work while the kids are sitting by passively allowing the teacher to learn a whole lot of stuff while the kids are just kind of, picking and choosing and not learning as much as they could be. Well, it all goes with the same idea. You want kids to be the ones driving their own education. You want kids to be the ones knowing what they're doing, why they're doing it, and what they're going to do next in order to improve. And if you guys have questions, make sure you put them into the chat. Aha. And Norma, I do see Norma has a question. She says, can we get a large group order to get volume pricing for this book? I can definitely check. If you guys are interested in purchasing Balance with Blended Learning, let me know. Send me an email with the number of books you would like to have. Is it just for you? Is it for your leadership team? Just how many books you would like to have. And I'll see if we can get volume purchasing for that. And we can collect that and ask Letty to do one order so that we can get them at a better price. That's a great idea. All right, so let me go on next. So there are actually two parts to metacognition. There is the knowledge of thinking or the knowledge of cognition, and there is the regulation of cognition. Now, I'm not going to read this entire thing here, but there is declarative knowledge, and that, for example, what factors positively impact my learning? What conditions help me to learn most effectively? Those are the kind of questions that kids should be self-asking or reflecting on or asking themselves as they're learning. There's also conditional knowledge. Which strategy should I select to complete the task at hand? Now, we know that, especially in math, you see a lot of the math processes, and we teach kids to follow very specific processes when they're learning math, and it's a way for them to think, because really what we're doing is we're teaching them how to think. When they follow a specific process, what skill am I learning? What particular strategy should I use to complete this skill? We have them write about it. Those are ways of teaching kids to think metacognitively. That's one of those words that I need to practice several times before I get it right every time. But those are the types, those are the types of questions that kids should be asking themselves. But in order for kids to ask themselves those types of questions, who has to drive that in the beginning? Has to be driven by the teacher, right? Yeah, because the teacher has to explicitly teach them how to do this, and how to question themselves, and how to think about their own learning, just like we do in math, just like the process that we do in math. We want them to think about that, whatever the skill or concept is that we're trying to get across to them or get them to understand. So the second part of metacognition is regulation of thinking. So here's where your goal setting comes in. Here's where students' goal setting comes. Students start to think about goals. What are my learning goals? Why, what do I want to learn and why? What do I hope to achieve? Do I want to just get a better grade, or do I really want to improve in this particular skill, or this particular concept, or in this particular idea, whatever it is? What specific steps do I need to take to accomplish this? If I don't have a goal, then it's really hard for me to figure out what my specific steps are to reach that goal, or to grow in my knowledge. So that's part of regulation of cognition. They also need to plan. They need to plan how they're going to attack something, how they are going to achieve, how they are going to be better at the concept, skill, task, whatever it is. So how will I tackle the task? What will my plan be for navigating the parts of this task? And what will I do first, second, and third? What do I do first? What do I do second? What do I do third? It's really as simple as that. That's the plan that they need to come up with. They need to be able to monitor their own comprehension. Am I understanding this, or do I not have a clue? How many times have you guys read an article and gotten to the bottom and said, I have no idea what I just read, either because I wasn't paying attention, or I was distracted, or maybe it was something I really wasn't very interested in. So in my head, I word called, but I never really attended to it and focused on it. And I know I've done that multiple times. I'm guilty of that. And I'll read a whole thing and then go back. I have no idea what I just read. Let me look at it again. And that's metacognition. That's saying, okay, I did not understand that. I know I didn't understand it. Let me go back and find out what I missed. Let me focus. Let me find another way to attack this. If that didn't make sense, let me find something else that will help me. Well, kids need to be able to do that as well. Debugging strategies. Is what I'm doing currently effective? Does this work? If I reread it, did I get it the second time, or do I still not understand it? Okay, so if I still don't understand it, what am I going to do in order to understand it? Am I going to get help from a friend? Am I going to find maybe the same type of text at a lower lexile level? Am I going to break it into parts so that I can just understand each part individually? I mean, there are lots of strategies that kids can be taught in order to monitor their own comprehension and to go back and find additional ways to ensure that they're comprehending. And the last thing that kids need to do is evaluate what they're learning. What did I learn from completing this test? Did I learn anything? Was it a waste of my time, or did I actually learn something from this? What skills did I develop as I completed this task? And is there something I could do to improve the quality of the work that I did? Now, I know today, especially right now, it seems very prevalent. You know, instead of kids just taking work and saying, done, you know, how they just want to be able to chalk it off. And I know I do that because I've got Post-it notes everywhere. Oh, done. I can mark it off, throw it in the trash. Did I learn anything from that? I don't know, but I finished it, and that's all that matters. And I feel like many cases, that's what kids do. Kids finish something and they call it good, right? And they have no idea if they learned anything or if they didn't learn anything, or, you know, and at that point, it's just a matter of checking it off the box, compliance. And we don't want kids just to be compliant. We want kids to actually be engaged and learning whatever the task or whatever it is they need to be doing. Okay, so students have to assume increasing responsibility for planning and regulating their learning. It's almost impossible for students to become self-directed when learning is planned and monitored by someone else. And that goes right back to who's doing the work in the classroom. Is it the teacher that is planning and monitoring, or is the student assisting with that planning and monitoring their own learning process? That all goes back to the same ideas. Any questions? Modeling, yes. Absolutely. You know, one thing about metacognition, you can't model it often enough for kids. It's not something that they do naturally. And so it is something, and a lot of us, a lot of teachers will model this without even realizing it. Just as you're thinking, you do think alouds. You think and you're talking about, what questions do I have? What am I thinking about? When I read this, did I really understand it? What does this word mean? Whatever it is, but you're basically verbalizing that thought process. And that's how kids learn to think metacognitively. Okay. So there are actually 5 different strategies that teachers can use to develop metacognition in the classroom. And we're going to talk about these different strategies. But one is kids need to learn to plan their attacks. They need to learn to determine, what is the goal of the assignment? What's my goal here? What am I trying to do? Hopefully it's more than just get a good grade. We want them really to think about why they're completing this assignment, and why is it important? What am I learning from this? Second is they need to describe the plan. Well, they need to what is the goal for the assignment and what do they want to accomplish? And then they need to describe what they plan to do and how they plan to do it. So what is their first, second, and third step, right? And next, they need to determine the strategy that they're going to use, just like they do in math. Am I going to what are the different math strategies that they can use? Am I going to use a formula, or am I going to use what's reasonable? I mean, what is it? So they have to determine what the strategy is that they're going to be using. And then finally, as part of planning their attack, is what aspect of this assignment may be challenging. And if they get stuck, what are they going to do? Where are they going to go to get help? How are they going to get help? And hopefully they won't go directly to the teacher. Remember, we want kids to be self-directed. We want kids to be self-motivated and engaged. And so we don't want them to immediately think, oh, if I need help, I go directly to the teacher. Now, that doesn't mean that the teacher's not there to help them. It doesn't mean that the teacher won't help them. But when you've got 15 to 30 kids in a classroom, there has to be multiple ways for students to find assistance or help on whatever the task is. It can't be just the teacher. And so we want them to look at, am I going to look on the computer and find additional information? Am I going to go to a friend that I know does really well in this? Am I going to break it down into smaller parts so that I can learn it more easily? They have to think about that. So if you notice, I've got, this is a link, and it does have this particular page, or the Plan Your Attack document. If you have teachers that would like to use this particular document, then you have access to that. You can download it, and teachers can use this with their students, just as they're learning to plan their attacks. And so students can use this as a template for their thinking. So that is available to you there. Feel free to download it and own it. Okay. So that's strategy one. One is to plan your attack, or for students to plan their attack. Next is a learning log using guided reflection. So we know that students a lot of times have learning logs or learning journals, or teachers may have them reflect as a writing piece, part of what they do in writing. I know that in math, sometimes you will have them go back and explain the process that they used to reach whatever the answer was to the problem that they were given. So this is a learning log, and this is a guided reflection. Again, kids need to learn how to reflect, how to look back at what they did and determine, did I learn something? And what did I learn? What could I do better next time to improve my learning, and so forth. So this is basically, which assignment are you reflecting on? Did you struggle with any aspect of the assignment? If so, what part? What did you do when you found yourself struggling? Did you sit there and just wait until class was over? Did you go and find a friend? Did you look for more information online? Did you go and look at a book that maybe the teacher had available for you? Did you ask mom and dad? I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do. Did you access, well, that's what I just said, a resource that helped you work through the challenging part? So what did you learn from completing the assignment? What did you find interesting or surprising as you worked on this assignment? And finally, is there any aspect, what questions did you have as a result of completing this assignment? Was there something that you wanted to know more about? Was there something that you still had a question about that you don't feel like you fully understood? And finally, is there an aspect of the assignment that you would like to revisit with the class or with the teacher? So again, this is a reflection, a guided reflection, and I do have a link also to that. And your teachers can use this with students and have them reflect on specific assignments. Do they need to reflect on every single assignment that they do? Probably not. But I would say if it's a big assignment, a writing piece where they use the entire writing process and their final piece, then I would have them do something like this. If they work on some kind of a project and they have their final deliverable, whatever that is, then you might have them do something like this. If you're at the end of a unit, you've taught a 10-day or 14-day unit, 15-day, then I would ask students to complete this. That's what happens when you talk too much. All right. So that's number 2, a learning log and guided reflection. So we've got plan your attack and a learning log. Those are 2 ways to teach metacognition. A third one, and I know a lot of you use exit tickets. I would imagine most of your exit tickets are what happened in class today. Perhaps, what did you learn? What did you, maybe a question about the learning for today. Teachers can also do an end of the week or an end of a unit exit ticket. And basically you would create, what you would do, well, let me show you this little video really quick first. Let me change how I'm sharing this though, so that right there. Nope, that's not it. So just take a listen to this really quick, and hopefully it will.
This cycle is focused on metacognition and helping students to build metacognitive skills, really teaching them how to think about their thinking, how to think about their learning. Teachers cannot be the only person in the classroom thinking about the learning happening. Students really need to share that responsibility if they are going to be our true partners in their learning journey, if they're going to really understand themselves as learners. So this cycle is designed to help you take metacognition, which can feel a little abstract and daunting, and pin it down into a really concrete routine and strategy you can use with students to help them start building their metacognitive muscles. So this strategy is one that happens kind of after the learning has taken place or after students have completed a task, a project, a unit. And so there are ways to build metacognition into the before with goal setting, during a lesson or during the learning by asking students to kind of think about, what do I know versus what do I not know? But this particular strategy is designed to come after. So the idea is that you create an end of the week exit ticket, an exit ticket that really drives students to think about, what did I learn this week? I'm going to identify a specific skill or concept that I learned, and I'm going to think about how I learned it. What process did I go through that helped me to learn this information or develop this particular skill? What questions do I have based on my learning this week? What goals do I have for myself as a learner next week? So connecting this reflective piece with goal setting as well. And then if I love this last question, if I had to teach this concept or skill to a peer or classmate, how would I go about doing that? What do I think would be an engaging way to learn this information or master this particular skill? So in this cycle, you're going to think about, for your students, your subject area, what kind of an end of the week exit ticket experience could you build into your practice to get students thinking about their learning and beginning to understand themselves as learners? Is your teaching practice sustainable?
Shelly, you're muted.
Darn it. And I was on a roll. Darn it. Thank you. Okay. So I'm sure you all noticed that that was a Google form that she was using there. Nothing special. It was just a form. Students would go into the form and they would enter their name. What did you learn this week? Identify at least one concept or skill. How did you learn it? And describe your process. What did you do to learn this particular skill or concept? What questions do you have about your learning this week? And what concepts were unclear? What goal do you have for your learning next week? So you're already setting kids up to create a new goal for the next week, right? And it's not, I mean, obviously, you still want to have goal setting conferences. However, this is giving them the opportunity to start thinking about what their goal is going to be for the next week of learning. And if you designed an activity to help a classmate to learn the concept or skill you learned this week, what would you have them do? So let me ask you something. How can this particular information benefit the teacher? And how can it benefit a student?
Oh, Ms. Smallwood, for the teacher, this is a reteaching opportunity.
Absolutely.
This is, do I have to reteach the whole lesson, or do I have to do something like a bell ringer?
Yeah.
This is a wonderful document to do, say, Google form. Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The one thing with the Google form is it will give you a spreadsheet of every single response from your students. And you'll be able to look through those responses and say, who actually understood what they learned this week? Did they, what questions do you have about, or what did you learn this week? That's going to let you know if kids even remember what they did during the week. right? And if they're able to describe the process, then chances are they did actually learn something. And if they're able to tell you, but I didn't understand this particular piece, then that's going to give you additional information for, as you said, for a reteach opportunity, right? And what about that last question? If you could design an activity to help a classmate, what would it look like? What kind of an activity would it be?
From the point of view of a student, that would guide the teacher as to not only do they gauge, like Mr. Garcia said, their activity, but then we see it through the lens of the student. It's how they learn best.
That's right. That's right. And what else do you, what more information might you glean from that question all by itself about a student? And yes, Mr. Garcia, you're right. You'll find out which kids, what kids like and what they may be tuning out. Absolutely. Because they'll remember the things they liked, right? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Best practices. How do the students learn? What are the best way to approach students?
Yeah.
You know, modalities, learning modalities.
Right.
That last question also, Ms. Smallwood, if you could design an activity to help a classmate to learn the concept, that falls into with the like fundamental 5, that small group purposeful talk, where they're talking in student language, and you may, as a teacher, you may need to tweak your lesson a little bit to make sure you're hitting all those different learning abilities.
Sure, absolutely. And do you think if a student is able to answer this question well, is that going to give you insight into whether or not they have a good understanding of the concept? If they give you a good sort of outline or whatever you want to call it for a lesson for someone else, that would give you some information as to what they actually learned and didn't learn. It would also help you find those students that could do some peer teaching, right? You can look at this and say, oh, this guy has a great idea. And I know this kid over here was struggling a little bit. I think I'm going to put them together and see if you know, John can help Jim with whatever that concept or content is. And so this particular exit ticket gives the teacher a lot of really good information about what kids are learning or not learning, right? And so I don't have a template of that, because this, of course, would be something you would create a Google Doc for. I'm sorry, a Google form for. But it would just include these questions right here. And since you have this presentation, you've got the questions that you can use to create your own form. And so, yes, definitely another way for students to start learning how to think metacognitively. So we've got plan the attack, we've got the learning log, and we've got an end of the week, could be end of the project, end of the week, end of the task, end of the unit, whatever, exit ticket. And again, students, this might take a little more than 5 minutes for them to complete, however. So this would be more of an exit ticket that you would give them a little bit more time to complete. All right, so those are 3 of the strategies. Let's look at number 4. I talked a little bit about think alouds and using modeling think alouds for students. Teachers should be modeling that process and thinking, you know, verbalizing what they're thinking when they're in small group, large group, you know, however you're engaging with students. Teachers should be modeling that process for them so that students start learning how to question themselves. So let's see here. So think aloud. One thing that you can do is you can ask students, or teachers can ask students, excuse me, to complete a think aloud video reflection using Flipgrid. I know that we use Flipgrid quite a bit. Teachers like it, students like it. It's very simple, but they could create a think aloud using Flipgrid based on an assignment, based on a project, based on, you know, whatever the task is. And they would do a think aloud. Well, this is what I was thinking about. And then I decided to use this particular strategy because it seemed like it would give me the best ability to whatever it is they're working on. And so Think Aloud's, what they do is they encourage students to engage in a metacognitive practice. Again, they're engaging in thinking about what they've been learning. It provides the teacher with valuable insight into a student's thought processes. Are their thought processes in line with what you want them to know? Or are they way out here somewhere and you know that there's no way they're going to be able to understand this concept because their thought process is completely off? It also creates a culture of learning because students can go back and watch each other's videos and learn from the thinking and strategies shared by their peers. So if I'm working on a task and I've completed it, and now another student is going to be working on the same task or similar task, well, they can go back and watch that video from student one in order to get an idea of what his or her thought process was. Now, obviously, you would probably, those thought processes that were way off base, you would not make those available for others to watch. But for those who had a really good Think Aloud video, that's a great resource for your students. So what you would ask your students to do, you would give them this sort of criteria. So in your, oops, stop that. Oh, there we go. So in your Think Aloud, what was the purpose of the assignment? Make sure you include all of these ideas and thoughts in your Think Aloud. What was the purpose of the assignment? What process did you use to complete the assignment? Where did you hit bumps and how did you troubleshoot these issues? You want kids to be confident and competent for working their way out of an issue or out of a speed bump, so to speak. What would you do differently if you were presented with a similar task in the future? How would you change it? What did you learn from this experience that will help you during your next experience? What did you learn and what skills did you develop as a result of completing the assignment? And what advice would you give someone else working on this assignment? So those are all things that give you some insight into what a student is thinking about and how they are attacking their learning. So again, teachers need to model their thought process to make it visible for students. It provides students a window into the teacher's metacognitive process. A teacher simply needs to verbalize their thought process during any activity within a small group or within whole group. All right, so now we've got 4. We've got plan the attack. We've got the learning log. We've got the end of the week exit ticket, and we've got a Think Aloud video reflection using Flipgrid. So let's see what this last one is. So number 5 is to track progress with ongoing self-assessment document, with an ongoing self-assessment document. Now, the self-assessment document would be something that would include, and let me show you what that looks like really quick. I've got an example of one here. I think the first thing you would do is start with the standards and have kids work in small groups to break down those standards into kid-friendly language. Now, obviously, you're not going to ask first or second graders to do this. You're going to help them a little bit more. But once you get into 4th, 5th, 6th, and definitely secondary, then they can look at those standards and start breaking them down into more understandable standards for them. And so what you would do is have them complete this. First, you would give them the skills that they would be covering during the unit. We'll say it's a unit. And think about the work that you've completed this week. Select a specific piece of work to analyze and reflect on in depth. So what they would do is they would use this particular handout or document to reflect on 1 or 2 pieces of work, maybe once a week or twice a week, or as often as the teacher feels is necessary. But they would identify the skill or standard to which the piece of work is aligned. So if you've got the skills up, posted for students to see, or have a place for them to go to see what skills and standards they're working on, or what this particular piece covers. They can look at those to make sure that they understand them. What is the title of the assignment that you're assessing? Obviously, that's here. Provide a link to online work. If they've done something in Google Drive, then they can give you a link to that particular document. And evaluate your work and give yourself a score based on where you think you are in relation to mastering the skill or standard, 1 to 4. 1 means you really don't have any idea, you don't know what you're doing or why. 4 means I got this, I understand it, I know why I did it, and I know what my strengths are. And then finally, have them explain the score that they gave themselves. Why did you score yourself a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4? So why did you give yourself that score? What details in your support and your work support the self-evaluation score? What does the piece show about your strengths as a student? What aspects of this skill or standard are you still working on or struggling with? And what specific support would help you continue to develop the skill? Okay. So again, you have this. You are welcome to download it and keep it and give it to your teachers. Okay. So tracking one's own progress can help learners to appreciate their growth and to identify areas where they need to invest more time and energy to improve. Ongoing self-assessments can be a very powerful metacognitive routine that spans the length of a unit. Okay, this would be done at the end of an entire unit, and have them choose 1 or 2 pieces that they completed that they could reflect on. All right, so this is what I'm going to do. This is where I hope it kept the poll, because I did do it, and let's make sure it's still there. Yay! Okay. All right. So I am going to launch a poll, and I would like for each of you to answer. Let me go ahead and launch it. And so you should see a little green dot showing you that the poll is live. Do you all see that? And then go ahead and answer the question. Which metacognitive routine would be or could be most easily incorporated into a classroom? Plan your attack, where kids plan how they're going to do something. A learning log. An end of the week exit ticket. A think aloud video reflection. An ongoing self-assessment document. All of the above or none of the above?
Ms. Smallwood, where is the poll? I'm sorry.
It should be, Miss Misha. Can you see it? Because I don't see it from
Yes. So on, if you look up at the top, like where you have like the chat, and you'll see like the people, and then next you'll see those 3 little shapes. There's a little green dot there. So if you click on there, and then you open up the polls, you'll see a little green dot next to polls. That means there's a new poll for you to work on. And click on polls, and then the poll will open up.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I see quite a few of you are choosing the end of the week exit ticket. I think that's something that teachers are familiar with. It's something that they already do. And I can see how they can definitely incorporate that in what they're currently doing. You know, you can do an end of the day exit ticket, or you can do one that covers a longer period. And I also know that quite a few students also use Flipgrid and would be able to do a think aloud video reflection, kind of you know, verbalizing their thought process instead of writing it down, I suppose. Although I think both are valuable. I'm glad nobody's choosing none of the above. So of course, Misha's going to jump in. No, I'm kidding. Awesome. Okay. Has everyone voted? I can't see how many people do we have in here, Misha?
Give me 1 second to go out of the polls and I can tell you. We've got 41.
Okay. So I've got about 32 of you that have voted. Some of you have not voted. I want to give you enough time to, refer back to the slides if you need to.
It's okay, Shelley. When you get your data at the end, you'll be able to tell who didn't do their work. So it's okay.
One thing about the new feature here, I don't know if any of you have used these. We can't see who has voted and who hasn't. And it's all anonymous to all of you because you're students, right? And actually, to me, it's anonymous right now. But at the end of this session, I will receive a spreadsheet with the question and all of the answers and who answered it. And so, not that I'm going to go back and grade you guys, but for a teacher, it could be very helpful for a teacher because depending on what type of question they're asking, this would give them an idea of who knows what students are thinking about or where they're stuck, depending on the type of question that you pose. All right, very good. So it seems like the end of the week exit ticket seems to be the most popular. And again, I think that's because that's something we're very familiar with. The Think Aloud video reflection is seems to be fairly popular, and quite a few of you say all of the above. So that's awesome. My goodness, I got to stop coughing here. Okay. All right, so I am going to go ahead and end the poll, and I'm going to hop over to our last slide here. All right. Oh, good. It already did it for me. All right. So let me hop over to the last slide here. Let me make it large. Can you all still see that? Is that a little bit easier to read? So I want you to consider the following questions. How can responses shared by students as they reflect metacognitively on their learning be used to improve teaching practices? How might their responses help teachers design more personalized learning experiences? That's question one. And question two is, how can metacognitive routines be built into current blended learning classrooms? How can they be integrated into models your teachers are currently using with students? Okay. So I've already got you broken down. What you might want to do, take a photo of this if you have a phone with you so that you'll have the questions with you. And I've got you broken into breakout rooms, just randomly assigned, so you're going to be mixed. But I want to make sure that, and of course, you can always come back to this main room to get the question if you didn't get it. But I'm going to give you guys about 5 minutes to discuss the questions, and I'll kind of hop in and out just to see where you're at and if you need any assistance. And so once I open the rooms, you guys are going to be added to a breakout room. Don't freak out. You're just going to be in there with a few other people. Okay. All right. Everybody should start popping back in here. I don't want to keep you all past the 1 hour. I know that time is interestingly enough, time is limited, even though it seems like we have more time, but it goes by more, it gets eaten up more quickly. I don't know. It's an interesting kind of thing here. Okay. So I wanted to make sure that you all had an opportunity to kind of experience the breakout rooms and the polls. I was going to do the Q&A, but I I did not get we didn't get a chance to do that. But who would like to just very briefly talk about some of the things that you came up with? How can responses shared by students be used to improve teaching practices? Who would like to try and answer that?
I can speak for Group 9, Miss Smallwood. Just one thing, so I'm not hogging all the microphone. You said that was mentioned by my principal a while ago. She said, you know, we shouldn't be gatekeepers of the information. We should, when we're doing these metacognitive practices, we should actually be explicit, as was mentioned by, I think, Ms. Carr. We should be explicit about letting the kids know this is why we're doing this. We're not just doing it so we can get an assignment done or another grade. We're doing this because we care about how the lessons are getting across to you guys. We want to see if they're working. We want to see if you like them. And here's your opportunity to kind of let us know. So if we explain to them, you know, why we're doing these activities, maybe we'll get a little bit more usable and honest feedback from the kids as well.
Right. Very good. Very good. Awesome.
And I want to add to that, we also as coaches, well, Mr. Garcia and myself, as coaches, we need to model that process with the teachers so they can, in turn, they can roll that out to the students. I know Mr. Garcia accuses me of talking to myself a lot, but I think it was because I did that in the classroom. You know, I modeled, you know, metacognition in the classroom, and so it's just something I do.
Mr. Garcia says it's endearing. That is awesome. Anybody else?
Miss Shelley, yes, I would like to add something. This
Sure.
is Maribel from Sled Elementary. In our group, we were talking about the importance of promoting conversations in the classroom. Okay, having students talk and share their thinking and processes. And I definitely agree with that, with all that. Something that I realize though sometimes is that, okay, the students' responses. When I think about students' responses, something that I notice as a coach is that sometimes our kids don't have the communication skills. They struggle. They struggle in communicating what they want, what they need, what they learned. And so that as a starting point, that's difficult because my reflection in regards to this is, okay, first of all, we need to become teachers of language, and the modeling comes in place, but also we need to remember certain tools that are available that we can use and that are effective with all kids. And it's the use of visuals and models that they can use as springboards to start to communicate what they need. And those are the famous thinking maps, for example, or those models that we use in math. When I'm in the classrooms and I try to, for example, solve a word problem, and we're a campus that pushes a lot for those strip diagrams and Singapore math models. I think the way the students look at the same model, you know, from bilingual speakers and monolingual, looking at the model and being able to communicate off of a model that is telling them the same reality, the same truth, the facts about something. I think that's important. We need to sometimes go back into those and help those students who lack those skills to at least use those maps as springboards and explain their learning and explain their reflections. And I don't know, because it's really difficult. And the classroom is difficult to provide with the time. And right now in virtual learning, it's even, the time is more limited. But
Right.
I'm not saying that it's impossible. But basically, I think that the student responses many times show they're struggling communicating what they want. And what is it that we need to do as teachers to promote that, to
Right.
support that? But that's
Right.
that's on my part. Thank you.
Oh, that's perfect. I think the thinking maps are a great way to help kids start learning. And it is a process, you know, just like anything else. It's not something they're going to be able to jump into. If they're second language learners, it's going to be even more difficult, at least to be able to explain it in English. And so I think all of those tools that you currently have in place would definitely help those kids to sort of learn the process and to move through the process a little more easily and learn how to communicate better. And I think you're absolutely right, for sure. For sure. However, we are just about out of time. Let's really quickly. Somebody has their mic open and
915-329-7450. Melissa was telling me yesterday that I was.
Okay, got it. Okay, so just very quickly, how can metacognitive routines be built into current blended learning classrooms? How can they be integrated into the models that teachers already use? Anybody like to take a stab at that one? Erica, no? I wasn't sure if you were thinking about responding. No?
Well, Ms. Smallwood, I think they can be incorporated into the digital notebook. I mean, that form for sure can be inserted there in several units, and the kids can just, do that. I mean, the exit ticket for sure on Fridays, that's the end of the unit, and so on. All of these, and we were discussing in our group, just starting to incorporate one piece at a time and modeling that for the teachers.
Yeah.
Because we as coaches can incorporate like an exit ticket for them through PLCs and say, okay, now this is how, you would do it in your classroom.
Right. Absolutely. One thing at a time. We've talked about this. I know when I do check-ins, you don't want to overwhelm teachers. They're already pretty overwhelmed already. And so we don't want to give them more than they need at the moment, because then they start getting, frustrated. But, one piece at a time, and little small bites, so that they can feel successful and not feel even more overwhelmed than they already do. So absolutely, guys. Well, I appreciate you all being here. Looks like we're about 2 minutes over time, and I apologize for that. But if you let me go ahead and put this back in the chat, the link to our presentation here, so that if you did not get it initially, you can go ahead and click on this link and have access to the presentation.